So now the next session, I have the pleasure of talking with Sriram Sitaraman, the Chief Information Officer of Synopsis. Sriram, thanks so much for spending time with us and with our audience today.
Morning, Louis. Thank you for having me here.
Sriram, first, for the audience here, Synopsis is such an important company in the technology and software landscape. Can you explain what the company does and the scale of Synopsis?
Of course. So Synopsis is the leading provider of EDA, electronic design automation software, semiconductor IP, and a lot of different security solutions. So if you're not familiar with this market, what that means is, all the leading semiconductor companies in the world, the big chip manufacturers, the big IP manufacturers, people who make smart devices, the phones, the TVs, and everything else, they use our technology to develop the advanced chips that go into the smart everythings of their product lines. So we essentially create software that help our customers innovate the next generation silicon chips. And we are in many different industries: automotive, Internet of Things, AI, cloud, just wherever you see a little bit of intelligence coming in through the electronics, we play a big hand on it. We also have teams that are focused on developing secure, high-quality software. So we have a security arm that goes out and helps organizations optimize security and quality in the DevSecOps world. So as you can imagine, creating chips is a complex process. It's a multi-year, multi-quarter process, and Synopsis helps bring that a lot more concise and secure. That's what Synopsis does.
That's amazing, and obviously a very leading-edge technology and software company. Sriram, so much is happening in AI these days. Everyone talks about it. You're a CIO of one of the important technology companies. Tell us about AI and how you think about AI in the context of Synopsis and employee experiences and customer experiences, customer value.
Oh, yeah. AI has been around for a very long time. In fact, that was one of our premises to get in touch with Coveo, right? The whole search platform using AI. You can see AI in pretty much a lot of your interactions on the web, on the, in your enterprise software, things that predict, things that, analyze, things that generate reports. They're all based off of some form of AI. We've relied on AI to help us get better at forecasting, predicting, analyzing, and making decisions. We've relied on AI to help us automate, manage a large number of the widgets that we own. So Synopsis, as a software company, we have, several thousand widgets around the world: laptops, servers, network devices, cloud instances, software applications. So AI plays a very important role in connecting all of them from where I stand, a service point of view, where my customers stand, accessibility point of view, and then from a productivity perspective, it helps connect all of them in an optimal way. For us, AI has been part of our core strategy in our software development world, our IT services world, finance, go-to-market, and several others. Now, what's happened in the recent months is the Gen AI, right? So far, we had the ability to look at and analyze data. Now we are dealing with technology that can synthesize information, right? It looks at data, historical or not. Not only can it analyze, but it can now synthesize. So we see a huge advantage from a CIO perspective. I'll give you the simplest example. So as technologies mature in the IT world, we are stuck updating documentation, right? Simplest things, operating systems. go from version 1 through 2 through 3, and you have the new features, functionalities change. Having a Gen AI component allows me to say, look at all of this existing documentation, and instead of pointing out a solution in an existing document, stitch all of the information from within these documents and generate a solution. Generate a solution in the context of the user who's asking this question, not based on what information is available in the documentation. So as you are showing here, we're looking at it from an employee experience and a customer experience. Now, from an employee experience, we want to make our internal employees a lot more productive, right? Take out the churn that they have in terms of understanding new services, new functionality that we've rolled out. Take out the churn of having to analyze, 30-page documents that we get from market research or from the product documentation. How quickly can we say, ask a question, get a summary, maybe then start engaging with that summary to get the information that you need that is important for your job. So the employee experience, and obviously this is the most common use today for the generative AI, is knowledge management. The lot less proprietary, we are consuming information, and then the AI tool generates appropriate either a summary or information or a solution. So from an employee experience, that's awesome. It's also helping us with code development, right? You've heard of the Copilot platforms. And they actually help complete, not just complete, they review, not just review, and they generate unit tests. Now, if you imagine doing all of that in a fraction of what would take an engineer probably a day to do it. That's good. Now, you still need the engineer to review, make sure it's consistent, it's compliant, but a lot of that could also be programmed into the Gen AI component. So employee experience, it's all about taking the churn out of their daily activities and helping them from a velocity perspective, helping
augmenting them, really.
Right. From a customer perspective, very similar things, right? So you buy 3 different tools. Now they come with 3 different documentation. How do you put them together in a flow? Now, Gen AI could say, hey, look, if you're using the following 3 tools, here's how you could use them together in a flow. And somebody is training the AI with, documentation, and the AI is presenting it with context to what the customer has, right? Maybe the customer has 3 other tools that are common in the industry. So stitching together all of that information is really, really cool. And finally, from a core technology perspective, there's a lot of work being done at Synopsys in implementing AI, Gen AI, and new technologies into our core features. So I think that's how we look at it. It's more assistive, and then we take the same, expand to the customer, and then try to pull it into our core functionality.
Yeah, it's really augmentation, and I know, the big reason why we're talking today is you guys have been such a precursor and an early adopter of AI. Now, generative AI, comes into the picture. What are some of the? I know we're doing some things together, obviously, but what are some of the? How do you think about the Gen AI? What Gen AI adds to the AI capabilities and the use cases at Synopsys?
Great. We talked about it a little bit in the previous conversation, but the way we are looking at it is how do we use Gen AI at Synopsys? Is we also realize, when Gen AI was introduced several months ago, clearly there was probably a decade's worth of research put into it. It was not like, no, here's a new platform, let's use it. Now, that also means that there are a lot of technology partners who had access, and then they put in the appropriate effort to make specific solutions available, right? So the way we look at it at Synopsys is configure, customize, develop. Where we want to use configure is there's a lot of commercially available solutions out of the box. Implement, start taking advantage, get that accelerated deployment schedule, right? Corio is a great example. The OpenAI PD is a great example. You've essentially done the work for us on the platform that we are using. We configure and we make it available for our consumers. Customize is a little bit more work because, we have some domain specific requirements. So we take the existing technology and then we have to train it. We have to augment it with maybe some ecosystem partners to say, look, while the platform's maybe 60% there, we need to do certain things to get it to 80%. And then over the next maybe year, 2 years, whatever, it'll get to where we need it to be. So good examples are, the existing OpenAI does really well because it was trained on the permissible GitHub code. A large portion of that is Python, Java, JavaScript, stuff like that. But for a company like Synopsys, where our core functionality is C, C++, Linux, it's a process, right? It's not as interesting as it's for a Python code developer. So that's where we are trying to customize. We're taking it in, putting it into our existing workflows. So it's not like a standalone system. It needs to work with a CI/CD workflow, for example. And then finally, from a developer perspective, the EDA tools are extremely domain specific, right? Whether that's verification, synthesis, mask, there's a lot of different functions that companies and industries specialize in. So we are trying to take these existing libraries, incorporate it into our products to help with our customers' requirements. So again, our process here, our thinking model is, use what's available. Let's get accelerated. Let's get that early adopter advantage. Let's build on that knowledge, customize, start including it in other parts of it while we learn how to deploy it for our customers.
Yeah, and we know you've been an incredible early adopter, obviously, including working together. As a CIO, we talked earlier in the session, in my session earlier, about this, the CIO headaches and so on. As a CIO, governing data, ensuring that your brand is a trusted brand, and that you deliver this in a cost-effective way, and so on. Can you comment on sort of the constraints and the opportunities, and how are you dealing with all this?
That's an interesting question, because how are you dealing changes on a monthly basis? Because the technology is changing on a monthly basis. But everything you've shown here are real concerns, right? So experience, we talked about the configure, develop, configure, customize, develop concept, and experience is very important, because or else the consumption varies. If the experience is good, the consumption is good. And so the output is generally good, as opposed to how we deploy it. Again, this is so new. We don't have a really good blueprint of how to deploy it successfully and maintain the cost aspect of it, maintain the security aspect of it, maintain how content is managed, what content is good, what content is bad. I also don't want my content to leave my company, right? So there's not a lot of clarity around what happens when the system learns. Is it going to use that information elsewhere? Because we are engaging with it today, sort of as a black box, right? We trust the vendors to provide the security architecture. Eventually, I think a lot of this will get a lot more transparent. We'll understand the inner workings. We'll get better. Accuracy comes up fairly often as well, because the problem with synthesizing content is you could synthesize whatever you want. You need someone to overlook and say, yep, this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense. Sort of like a thumbs up, thumbs down that you see in the various GPT features, right? That still means that there's always going to be that doubt saying, is this accurate? Should I pull this information into my development stream? Because 9 months down a development stream, you don't want to know that a decision that you made 9 months ago has an impact. But this is also true with the human way of doing things. So I think we'll learn and get better, but these are very genuine concerns.
Yeah, obviously, and the accuracy, that's why that's why we talk so much about relevance in conjunction with generative answering and so on. So those are all key considerations that all CIOs face. Certainly admire your early adopter mentality and really the fact that Synopsis, with your leadership in particular, is really ahead of most organizations in terms of, as you very well said, we'll figure it out. Essentially, as long as you can deploy this in the guardrails of that matter, basically, that you can govern data, that you don't breach security, that you can deliver a great experience. Sriram, as always, you're such a thought leader. On behalf of all of us at Coveo and the audience, we want to thank you today for spending time with us and sharing. What is today at Synopsis more than a thought process. It's you're making it a reality and an example to follow. So thank you on behalf of all the audience for spending time with us.
Thank you, Louis, and I wish you success on Relevant 360.